well fed as well. So yeah, welcome to Sydney MuleSoft Meetup, the last of the year. So yay for the holiday season to come. So yeah, so today we're going to be talking about all about API security unveiled, and we're going to have some lovely guest speakers as well today. So if I just go to the next slide, you've all registered already, so good job on that. So for our agenda today, we're going to start off with some introductions on who the MuleSoft team is, who your MuleSoft leaders are as well, most importantly. And after that, we're going to get a few updates on MuleSoft from Harshana, who's going to give us all the lovely new updates on the products. Following this, what you guys really came here for. So it's the panel interview with a few lovely guest speakers. So we have Padma from CBA, we have Michael, the CRO of Noname Security. We have Troy, the lead architect of Noname, and lastly, Carlos as well from For You and Your Customer. Yep, so this is Eva. Eva is one of our MuleSoft leaders. She's been with the MuleSoft Meetup group for a really long time now. Unfortunately, she sends her apologies because she has some customer meetings she unfortunately could not get out of. And also we have Krishna, if you want to stand up quickly so everyone can see who you are. That's Krishna right over there, one of our lovely meetup leaders as well. And also, if you want to get involved and become a MuleSoft meetup leader as well and get more involved in terms of what topics we talk about, if you have any topics yourself that you want to talk about, feel free to reach out to me, Harshana, or even Krishna as well, or Eva, and we can set that up as well. Yep. So this is internally our, let's say, trailblazer guys. We have Harshana Martin. Would you like to quickly say hello to everyone? Perfect. Yep. And I myself as well. Okay. So next, really, what is a meetup? Put your hands up if you've already been to a meetup before. You know, good. Yes. And whose first time is it here? You know, yeah. Okay, awesome. That's what I like to see. And welcome. This is a really safe space, I guess you could say. We're all about being community-led. And what that means is we arrange these for you guys. So whenever you might have noticed, maybe they run around quarterly, but this quarter in particular, we decided to do 2 just because someone came up to us and was like, oh, there's a topic I'm really interested to talk about. And some of fellow customers or companies also are interested in. And that's how these meetups are set up. And some of these can range from different use cases. So for example, security of what's happening within the industries. It could be new product demos that we've done in the past as well. And not only that, we also run a little bit of workshops or even run some customer success stories as well to kind of share the knowledge around about what's working and what isn't as well. All right, perfect. And now I'll hand it over to Harsh.
Thank you very much, Selina. So we are going to cover pretty quickly in 5 minutes. What's the new update on the platform and the universal API management perspective. So I'll start with the platform. So we had a new version of Maven, Mule Maven plugin, which is the version 4.0. Immunit, again, along with that one, we released version 3, which is like a jump from 2 series. And then for the Mule Maven plugin, it's jumping from 3 series. We had Studio 7.16, again, the latest version. And then we had the Runtime Fabric 2.5 version. So with the 2.5, there are quite a lot of changes from the usability perspective. So for example, the number of environments that you can associate with the Runtime Fabric has actually increased from 100 to 200. So some of that might impact you, some of that might actually ease you. And yeah, so have a look at the release notes. The last thing is actually the Java 8 end of life announcement. I'm not sure whether you have received the communications from MuleSoft, but you are supposed to by this point. So we have provided that public announcement as to Java 8 has been there for a long time now. So the platform has been had a massive uptick, but now it's actually in the downward spiral. A lot of the ecosystem of Java 8 has moved on. There are quite a lot of new Java versions, including Java 21. So there's no point of hanging on to Java 8 anymore. So it's time to move on. So we are sunsetting the version 8 support with 4.9 runtime, and then bringing in the support for Java 17 starting next February. So you're going to see quite a lot of details coming out from MuleSoft perspective. So myself, my team, broader MuleSoft team, we will be talking to you. Our partners like Krishna, they'll be talking to you. So we'll be actually working together to make sure all your apps are up to date from the Java support perspective. Jumping on to the Universal API management. So we just released the version 1.6 for the Flex Gateway. So that's part of the ecosystem of Universal API management. Quite a lot of, again, new features. It's constantly evolving area. And for the second point, we just released the API governance developer experience, and then the catalog governance. So last month before last, actually, it's been 2 months already. So we released a new capabilities around the runtime governance for the API governance, because initially what we had was the development time or the design time governance. So we had to get the next step done, which is the runtime governance of the API instance. And now we are expanding that capability into the developer experience, which is around who can see what, like providing feedback, providing the visibility permissions from the organization perspective into different groups. So that's not a capability that we had before. So that's now in the platform. Additionally, the API catalog governance, which is actually showcasing what are the different APIs out there, what are the vulnerabilities associated with that APIs, and can I get a report exported from the platform? So previously, anyone who logs into the platform can see it, but wasn't available for the role-based associations. Now you can actually do that one. So those are the greatest and the latest features that we had in the past 2 months time, because this is just the delta between the last meetup and today. So this is the changes that I wanted to actually highlight. And jumping ahead, so there are quite a lot of new features, enhancements coming into the platform. Please have a look. Please sign up with the MuleSoft newsletters, so you get all these different changes to you every time we do a release. So with that, I'm going to get to the most important part of today's agenda, which is handing over to our friend Carlos.
Thank you. I think I have this other one. Can you guys hear me? Okay. The way we designed this section is basically we are going to do a quick introduction on API security. And, you know, it may sound a bit basic, like we all may think that we understand what security is, but actually Noname makes it very interesting. It has a very unique value proposition, and it's working very closely with MuleSoft in order to extend what basically Harsh was talking about with Flex Gateway and Universal API Management. It takes that to the next level. So a little bit about me. I work for Foryouandyourcustomers. We are we come from a European group. We focus on all aspects of data. And obviously, security, API security is a big aspect of data. And obviously, that's what we focus a lot and we are growing this region in Asia, well, in APAC. 3 things about me that probably not everybody knew. We started doing this back in Melbourne, and we just think it's fun. So we are going to give it a go here. One thing I probably didn't know is that I've been on a keto lifestyle for almost 5 years. Overall, I think I lost over 35 kilos, you know, and then I have been able to maintain it. So ask me next year, we'll see. And also my kids wake me up every day at 6 a.m. So I have no excuse, but basically to coach calisthenics. And so that's again another thing that I've been trying to keep up over the years. And the third thing that I truly believe, and I'm not kidding, I truly believe that we live on a simulation program, and we should not try to prove it. And probably we can take that offline because you may be thinking I'm crazy, but I'm not. I have proof. Let me just, you know, before talking about API security, let me start with one line that to me encapsulates the importance of API security. It says, a bird sitting on a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking because her trust is not on the branch, but on its own wings. You know, if you think about what that means or what may mean around API security, well, it resonates to one thing that a very smart CISO said a few months ago, which is basically there is no way we can avoid cyber attacks. It is pretty much like the same, you know, for all of us who are in the technology business. There's nothing you can do to avoid a crash in technology. You know, you architect this and you design thinking that things will fail eventually. Well, in an API security point of view, there is nothing we can avoid we can do to avoid a cyber attack. But the key is that there are a lot of things we can and should do in order to avoid a data breach. So, you know, there are two totally different things. A cyber attack is something that eventually we are going to be victims in our organizations, and not just once, multiple times. How prepared we are to ensure that we can prevent that or stop that, then that is what we are going to take us to the next level on avoiding data breaches. And that's what we are going to be talking today. You know, we have seen statistics like this. I'm pretty sure Troy will bring some others that are probably a bit newer, but the reality is that we know the surface attack around APIs is growing. We know that there are people who say that the surface attack is larger than even web UIs. I truly believe that, because most of those web UIs are relying on APIs, and we in the technology space, we are building APIs every day. So we know that, yes, they do provide that business agility, business, speed, and it helps organizations to move faster, to unlock data and be able to share that data easily. But also because of this, then the evolution, the rate at which APIs are being generated is basically out of control. And what this is creating is that problem that, well, that surface attack is becoming a vulnerable soft spot. And there are a lot of, not just cyber attacks, but there are a lot of data breaches. We have seen a lot of news like this. And again, we don't want to talk specific names, but when I go to the newspaper and I read something like this, I get mixed emotions. Because if I put on my hat as an end user, as a consumer of these services, I get nervous. I start thinking like, am I a victim of these companies that were victims of cyber attacks? And I don't know if this has happened to you, but I get nervous every time that I receive an SMS on my mobile, and I know very clearly it's a scam. But then they are referring to me by name. So at least they have my name, they have my mobile number. What else do they have, And they know that I'm in IT, so where did they get that information? It gets me nervous. But then it comes my other hat from a technologist point of view, and then I get excited because this is a problem that I have been trying to crack for many, many years. How hard is it to really prevent data breaches? Is it possible? Is it actually something that we can achieve? Or is it something really, really hard that, we need to be rocket scientists in order to make it happen? And then it comes down that there is actually a way. It's actually not that hard. And, I was very happy when I found ways in which we can make it happen. And Troy was going to talk a lot about that. Just to finish on my talk track, I just want to introduce you to something that basically I call 5 pillars of API security. And in my opinion, this is fundamental in order to have a full end-to-end coverage of the spectrum of possibilities of things that can go wrong. And everything starts by one question that I ask customers every time. The question is, how many APIs do you have? Based on that, on the answer, I read a lot, because it can go from 100 or 200, and it's like, no way. How can you know that you have 100 or 200? If one day someone tells me we have 187, we are working on the 188 tomorrow, then I will be like, oh my God, these guys know what they're talking about. But everybody said like, oh, we have 100, we have 200. So some customers actually tell us the truth, and like, I don't know, over like, probably 200, 300. Well, the second question that I ask is, okay, and how many APIs do you have that you don't know you have? And they think it's a silly question, but it's a provocative question, because whatever number they tell me, I just basically tell them, well, it's actually a number larger than 0. There are APIs that you are running right now in production. I can guarantee that you don't know they are there. And usually these are the ones that are the ones in which you are going to get those data breaches, unfortunately. But it's a very difficult problem, because how can you protect something that you don't know exists? It's pretty hard, right? So, for many years, I've been trying to find a way in which we can capture all that API inventory of APIs, but that covers everything, not just the things that you know you have, but those shadow APIs, those zombie APIs. How can you cover something that you don't know exists? For many years, and if you have heard me talking in the previous years, I've been basically going through documentation and asking SMEs and trying to get a lot of this from people. But if they don't know, whatever you do is going to be incomplete. Well, there is a way in which you can capture the real number of APIs. And normally, whatever results out of this is always 30 to 40% more APIs than whatever number they mentioned originally. The second thing, once you know everything, let's say that you know everything across all, not just APIs, let's just call them data points, because it's not just going to be APIs, it's going to be microservices, it's going to be, a batch jobs, it's going to be anything that can serve data and will be a victim of a data breach. So once you have all of these things, how do you know if you have the right level of security in place? How do you know if you have the right level of protection in place? It's pretty hard. Again, you need to have someone who knows a lot about API security to tell you. And normally that someone is very hard to find, especially 24/7. But imagine that you are able to uncover all of these vulnerabilities. And when you are presented with this API catalog, then it tells you and it gives you a risk score that is basically going to be like, hi, this is very, very bad. You have to fix this or you are going to be hacked tomorrow. Or this is actually more or less bad, or this is actually good, like good, bad. If we have that, and then we have that posture management that tells us exactly how to remediate those issues, then we're in a better shape. But then remember what I said, like cyber attacks, well, there's nothing we can do about it. So what can we do if we get a cyber attack? Well, if we have if we have an API attack management in place, like, something that is constantly 24/7, and it's a non-human, that is going to be constantly analyzing behavior at runtime, identifying patterns, and all of this is based on trained models, machine learning models that can identify when a broken object level authorization is occurring in near real time, and then can communicate back with those API gateways, with the flex gateways that Harshana was talking about, with those firewalls, and it can change rules in near real time to stop an attack. Then we can prevent data breaches. Okay, but then if we couldn't, like, it's probably going to be fast, but probably it took, I don't know, certain time in order to stop an attack. What happened to that data? What data was compromised? So again, that post-mortem analysis is very important. And that is going to show us exactly what was breached, what data was breached. And again, we want to know that if we are in an enterprise business, because we need to take actions. We need to go and notify consumers and users about things, this group of people and this data was compromised. And then finally, active testing to me is also very important, because as it doesn't really matter what technology we use to create APIs. Customers are using MuleSoft plus other technologies as well. At the end of the day, we should not be able to differentiate across following a CI/CD pipeline, identifying what vulnerabilities we are leaving during the dev test phase before we push something into production. So we don't want to see reds in the risk assessment in the control plane. We want to see greens. But in order to push greens from the beginning, we want to know what is wrong before it was pushed to production. and that is the concept of active testing. So as part of your but again, you need to know what to test. If I ask any of you, like right now, okay, run these Mule APIs and ensure that run a penetration testing to ensure that there are no vulnerabilities, it's going to be hard, right? Like, where do I start? But if I give you a way in which you can use a Docker container, and you can rule very specific rules that apply to your API, and it's going to produce a report, and that report is going to tell you this number of APIs are basically having this vulnerability. So no way, we are not going to promote to production. Then you can automate that, and then that's easy. And then whatever you push to promote to production, then it's less risk of being data breached. And this is basically the basis of what API security is. And with this, over to you, Troy.
Cheers, thanks. Yeah, I've got lip hold up. Just checking. Hear me all right? All good? So yeah, Troy Leliard, grew up in Zimbabwe, English wife, live in Australia. All nationalities covered. I was joking earlier today, I think I've got 4 or 5 nationalities. So when it gets to World Cup, I've got most bases covered. Does make for some interesting dynamics. In the same keen, it's typically 2 truths and a lie. So I'll go through it really quickly. Run a marathon in 3.5 hours. Anyone believe it? Qualified for an ultramarathon? It's a bit of a loaded question, right? Because if you don't believe the first one, how are you ever going to believe the second one? And I've been bidden. Anyway, all 3 are true, basically. So I started off my running career, really happy that I finished the half marathon, got the photo, showed all my friends, and someone pointed out that I was being beaten by somebody with a prosthetic leg. And that could have energized me into start training a lot more, and ultimately did the London Marathon in 3.5, qualified for an ultramarathon, Comrades Marathon in South Africa, if anyone's familiar, but then tore my ACL, and hence the body shape I've currently got. I'll skip through some of these. I do like it just a baseline in terms of very visually, the concepts behind an API, right? And the waiter in the back end, this age-old way of explaining APIs. You've got your consumers ordering off the menu, which is your specification, inputting it to the waiters, they taking it to the back end, getting the operations and some output. The whole idea behind the specification is reusability, and that contractual rigor that you can have behind it, and doing enforcement. Waiters come in all shapes and sizes, so XML, SOAP, REST, GraphQL, gRPC, and I think the importance is that we have to accommodate for all of those. So APIs, where are they? They're kind of everywhere these days. You can see this huge growth in terms of where it's come from in 2006 to 2020, and I'm sure if we had the 2023, it would just carry on that same sort of trajectory, right? I'm an analytics person, so sorry about some numbers. But we did some research in 2022, and on average, admittedly, it was US companies, Western Euro companies of about 3,500 FTEs and more, and on average, they had about 15,000 APIs. And I was like, yeah, come on, man, not buying into that. But you start thinking about digital transformation, you start thinking about digital decoupling. You've got legacy systems that people now are looking at systems of engagement into systems of record. You've got COVID that's helped accelerate a lot of that. You've got 7, 8 environments before you get to production, and you start believing that number a little bit. The 2 ones for me was the growth, so 200% growth over 12 months. Again, I think evident in COVID as well, really trying to drive that as well. And ultimately, how do you cope with this growth? There's this huge acceleration of APIs that traditionally used to be in the data center. Now they've been exposed to partners, to customers, to B2B, B2C, all sorts of different things, right? And so they're a bit of a blind spot, right? There's this rapid growth and development. They've deployed across hybrid multi-cloud, everything from mainframes to serverless. You've got this huge plethora of how these things are deployed. You've got businesses pushing their development teams to release functionality quicker and quicker. And often that's at the detriment to security. And so, that's why APIs are becoming kind of like the main attack surface, according to Gartner. And if not the main attack vector, they certainly are playing a critical part in capturing data and being part of that attack chain, right? So again, very much analytical. Some reports, and they're all on our website, but you can go and see them. There's this concept of what we call the security disconnect. And we have it quite a lot. So, a couple of years ago, going around talking about how important API security is, and we had nodding heads, and yes, we agree, but it wasn't urgent. And then there's a few things that happened. We all know what they are, and all of a sudden it became important and urgent. And the realization came where a lot of people thought they had solutions, like, CDNs and WAFs and SAST and DAS tools, and they thought they were covered. I think 78% thought they had adequate controls in place. That same number reported an API incident in the last 12 months. So there's this huge disconnect between technologies that were deployed and what coverage they were getting specifically around APIs. Right? As a result, we launched into bug bounties. We started into a lot more red teaming. The problem, again, infrequent, high cost, huge queues to get that release velocity out or up. Right? So what does this all mean? I mean, ultimately, it's this huge security gap that's just growing, right? And the only way we can really address this is getting smarter about how we do things. You talked about automatic inventory. We talked about rich metadata in that inventory so we can make better decisions. We can orchestrate better workflows when it comes to that sort of inventory. And if there's any questions or any, if you want to call BS on any of these slides, please do. I can always divert you to my CRO over there. So what can we do about it? A little bit of the Noname plug, right? So platform, ingest all sorts of traffic, analyze it using AI and ML. A couple of call outs about the technology is, that's one of the reasons those existing enforcement points or control points aren't effective, because a lot of them are inline and they need to make decisions really quickly. So they're signature-based, pattern-based for the traffic. Noname takes a different approach. You're kind of like a seam for APIs. We take a copy of the traffic from multiple locations, pull it into our platform. We've got the benefit of a few extra cycles to do more deeper AI, ML, and correlation around what's actually happening. And that goes across into both, behavioral and anomaly detection, which also then sees into business logic abuse, which, those of you who would know, OWASP top 10, I think 3 out of the top 5 all around business logic abuse. Right. So I didn't want to test the demo gods. So I've got a couple of screenshots. I'll get through them really quickly. If you do want a demo, reach out to For You and Your Customer. We can definitely set up a quick demo and go through it. A little bit about the UI. The two things I wanted to call out here, and it's a segue into our partnership with MuleSoft. So as you can see, top right, like where they are in the Gartner quadrant, right up there, like that. The key thing about the Noname platform, and I think one of the things why we now have good partnerships with the likes of MuleSoft, is we help identify those shadow APIs, those zombie APIs that don't go through those great enforcement points that they have. And we pick that up by ingesting traffic from loads of different places, pull into our platform, and we've got that rich payload visibility that we can say, hey, we've got APIs here that are bypassing your API gateway, they've got weak authentication, and they've got PII data, right? Let's put a risk on that, and let's actually onboard those onto your gateway platforms. A little bit again about the UI, just on the far right, there's all the different types of data types, very granular platform where you can create your own data types pertinent to your industry, your verticals. If IMEIs are important to you or account numbers, you can create all of that. What I want to call out here is a little bit in terms of some of I think I've got some click-throughs. So very granular, very rich metadata around the APIs, auto-discovered, down to the sorts of things where, we talked about APIs coming out in the early 2000s, huge documentation gap. So using the platform based on observed traffic, we can actually build candidate open API specs that you can then QA, correlate, stick back into the platform. Similarly to MuleSoft, you can look at live traffic conformance against the spec, which backends aren't seeing or endpoints aren't seeing traffic. So it really helps with that automated compliance and governance when it comes around the API contracts. The calculated risk score. So again, helping to calculate, which APIs carry sensitive data that are heavily consumed that maybe aren't aligned to the open API spec. So going back to that use case, we've got 15,000 APIs. How do you see where to focus first? You've got all of this data. So what? Now what do you do about it? So being able to sort of categorize by risk, and each of those risks breaks out into, I think it's about 8 or 9 different attributes that you can then drill down in and systematically put in a program of work to help reduce your risk posture when it comes to APIs. The good old stuff like network topologies, that's a good example because it kind of highlights where an AWS API backend is directly accessible via private link, API call flows. Again, all that's kind of feeding into our AI ML model. So once it's baselined, we can then pick up behavioral anomaly detection. So what else have I got up here? You can't see it under there, but we've jumped from the LLM bandwagon, the good old buzzword. So again, helps in the security operations perspective. If someone sees an open API spec, they may not understand what that all means. So our platform now takes the open API spec, passes it through a private instantiation of an LLM, sits out a human readable, easy to understand purpose of what that API is. Onto security, what is severity, a bit boring. We use the OWASP top 10. In our roadmap is different frameworks. So I know, PCI 4 is trending at the moment because it's coming up, NIST, a whole bunch that you can select in the platform. Where else are we going now? So this is something that's in private preview. And again, this is kind of flipping again, helping more in the security operations and looking at the attack chain of APIs and pulling in things like, using again, AI ML to help you with that auto confidence score. Someone's doing something, but is it legitimate attack? How severe is that attack? What should you be doing about it? And again, using AI and ML to do those large computational things around assessing that risk. So let's get through all of that. I'll just call this out really quickly. So by default, we don't keep all that payload information. We don't want to become a huge repository of sensitive data. So once we analyze it, discard it. The exception being is if there's an attack, we would keep it as evidence. But in that instance, we sanitize any of the data. So a whole bunch of rules around PII, PHI, PCI, but you can also create your own rules. So let's get through some of these. I wanted to get through to a couple of real life world problems. So trying to bring a little bit of examples to the live platform, and then we can. So credential spraying, large retail beauty chain. As you can see on the far hand right side, we could just basically see that they're doing a spray. Again, very common attack, and what you should do about it, some guided remediation. We can see that another good example is, funny enough, this is one of our labs that we can show that we do a bit of an attack lab. I've got a plug for it in a little bit, so get your QR codes ready. I'm going to run a session on the 20th of December. It's about a 3-hour red team, blue team type of session. We'll learn how to attack an API and then how Noname picks up on it and just have a bit of fun with the platform. But very much basic fuzzing. Someone was able to stick in a negative value into a field and in essence, credit their own account. Real world problem, right? You kind of think shouldn't be happening in today's world, but it does. And BOLA. So sorry for all the obfuscation. Need to anonymize it to protect the guilty. But again, this one was internal, and probably that's where the lapse in security came. But basically, you authenticate as an internal employee, and then you could manipulate the other employee IDs, which were, I think in this case, were easily guessable. So often you don't have a GUID or a UID that's more difficult, and basically you're able to enumerate your colleagues' personal information from inside the company. So a quick segue now into Noname and MuleSoft. So we're technology alliance partner, and part of that use case, as I talked about a little bit earlier, is how do we take all that stuff on the right-hand side that's not having the benefits and the controls and all the great stuff that MuleSoft offers, being able to quantify that risk and where necessary and appropriate. And of course, the MuleSoft guys here will say all of it should shift left and all go into the MuleSoft ecosystem. And we're working back in HQ on some pretty good integrations, not just from being able to capture it, but how we can cross-feed data as well. So directly within the MuleSoft Exchange and in the reporting, you'll be able to see APIs that are not actually managed by MuleSoft, but have been discovered from an F5 and associated with their risk and what information they've had. And then you've got the option to onboard that into your platform. As promised, I'm pressing the wrong thing. There we go. So this is the workshop. I'll flash the slide back up, or you can, I think we're distributing the slides afterwards. Feel free to register. Like I said, bit of fun, a few hours, getting some hands-on experience on the platform, and you get some great Noname shirts at the end of it and a nice little certificate of attendance. Good. And with that, it's a wrap. Any questions or any thoughts? Please.
API that give you a view of what one API for your environment.
Correct. So that whole inventory, you can slice and dice on any of that metadata. So where you're capturing it from, what's the host name, what's the path, what's the data contained within the API. You can enrich that inventory with other sources like your CMDB, so who the business owner is. So all of that's able to be sliced and diced with the inventory. Great question, because I mean, you've got 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 APIs. How do you actually get to the APIs that are of interest to you? So we've got a query editor built into that API inventory that's got compliance, conformist, PCI, authentication, all those sorts of queries written directly in there. So you can get to the proverbial needle in your API inventory haystack pretty quickly. Yeah. And I think, spot on, Mike. And I think the events that happened about a year ago now and triggered off a lot of interest around API security. And a lot of people said, hey, are we exposed? Are we likely to end up in the news? And they put that to their senior leadership teams, and a lot of them passed it down. And they're like, hand on heart, we actually don't know how many APIs we've got. We don't know how they're being consumed. We don't know what's the data within them. So it kicked off a manual review of people running around to different business units and say, here's a spreadsheet, fill it up. 4 or 5 months later, they're like, right, we've got this list, but hang on, we've been releasing, into production 3 times a week. So that list is start again, right? So, and that's where it gets to this automated near real-time inventory. I didn't show it in the platform, but we track changes. So if we've got an API in the inventory, and 2 days later you do a release and you introduce a new header, that would get flagged up as a change to that API, and you can correlate that to your change controls and things like that. So it really helps that automated compliance and governance once you've got your house in order, if that makes sense.
You have separate sites.
Mhm.
Is there like how do we discover and identify that we got new APIs built?
Good question. I skipped through it because I was trying to get to the panel, but let me pop back to one of the capabilities. So we've got a module called active testing, and that's specifically developed for or designed to be in pre-production. And in that scenario, so there's 2 things. You can use the main product to discover all of your APIs. It doesn't matter if they're pre-prod or not prod. So you can get that inventory regardless of the source. But our shift left capability is, in essence, it's a smart API. I don't want to say DAST, but that's the easiest way to explain it, where you can ingest the specification, whether it's a WSDL, RAML, spec, etc. And our platform would automate, it would ingest the specs and use AI ML to understand the CRUD operations, the relationships between consumer and producer side. And then it would try and test those using to break business logic. And so that's kind of that shift left capability that can be from the main platform as well. So hopefully I answered your question. There's 2 parts. So the core observability can run in any environment. That doesn't matter. So you can pick up new APIs, you can pick up shadow APIs, you can pick up APIs that were used once and haven't been used again for 60 days. You can then also use active testing to proactively try and test API-specific tests earlier in the DevOps pipeline before they get to production.
Yeah.
Did I sort of answer it?
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect.
And another question is,
Sure.
we've got agent and inline and everything, embedded to actually, have the API traffic monitored. So in case if there is an issue with these agents and monitor, does the API get affected or it's just the pass-through?
So great question. 99%, 98% of our integrations are out of band and asynchronous. So we don't add latency or service risk to that from our platform. What we do have is integrations where we can do API calls or webhooks into existing enforcement points and make blocking changes, token revocations, and things like that. So even though we're out of band, we can still facilitate blocking and preventative measures. Coupled with that, we've got an extensive library of workflows. So we can send it to a SIEM, a SOAR, a ITSM, all those sorts of bits as well. So, typical use case, we've seen something that looks like an indicator of compromise. Let's block it for 5 minutes. Let's trigger a workflow. They can come back and, extend that block or do that. All those sorts of things are possible in the platform.
So we think about inline and but we have customers, specifically our larger set of customers, where it's such a diverse architecture that agents are helpful, inline is helpful, but we prefer plugins and integrations for it's out of band. So it's like when you think about Noname, our DNA is APIs, right? I think it's similar to MuleSoft, and so it's how we run the business, being flexible for their architecture. That's really the line. They're not that attractive, but they are.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, if you want to, we can go all the way into sort of eBPF and kernel stuff, but
Yeah, no
that's kind
worries.
of more edgy.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Any more? All good?
Okay, so can we
Get the
have
panel up.
our panelists? Michael,
There we go.
Padma, Troy?
Do you need a clicker or anything? Do you need another mic?
Yeah, probably. Can I just have one of these?
So while they're getting set up, I brought a whole bunch of swag from Melbourne. I don't want to take it back with me. So if you've got a couple of good questions, heads up, because you can get something thrown at you.
They don't have to be good questions, just questions.
No, come on. I've got to set the bar high and then
Okay,
drop it
okay.
down a little bit. We're going to see if you're all good.
I'll give you the mic. You can pass it on. I have a mic, right? For me, it's good. Oh, we can have multiple. Awesome. Padma. So great questions so far. Let's keep asking those questions. We prepare a couple of just preempt questions. But if you still have some like we just covered a lot, literally, you know. And basically it is the best time to basically ask these guys who know more than any of us together. So let's just start with a quick intro. Michael, if you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you are using your experience in the current role at Noname Security.
Yeah, so a lot of times I get asked, what my position at Noname is, and I think a more interesting question is it why? Like what is the sort of the why question? So the 35-second answer to that is that I have the hero of my life is my mom, and so she raised 7 of us by herself. And my dad had brain cancer when I was very young. I was 8 years old, and he ended up living for 25 years, but he ended up living in a VA hospital. So it's a veterans hospital in the United States. And in that time span, it ended up that we were extraordinarily broke. There was no resources, but my mom was the resource. And so she taught me, 3 things that I think are relevant to this crowd. One is this idea of resiliency, right? Of no matter what, like we always had a meal on the table. She just made it happen. There was just no stopping her. The second thing is that there's this concept that she gave our 7 kids. We were awful children, by the way. Like we shouldn't even be allowed to live lives as children, and we proved it. But she offered this idea of unconditional love to us. And then the third thing, it's related to resiliency, but it's not the same. It's this idea of just never quitting, just always showing up, being there for just an impossible task. And so what those 3 lessons, what that gave to me and what I'm offering back to our partnership with MuleSoft and for our customers is that the organization that I've helped build at Noname. I was the 4th employee at Noname. This is my 3rd startup at very early stages, is those sorts of like, I'll give you resiliency. I'll never quit. And I promise you that I have unconditional love for our customers and our partners. And it shows up in who we hire, how we build product. And it makes, when you have that sort of hero that I have as my mom, it's an architecture that's unbeatable, I think. So that's it gives me a unique qualification and frankly an excitement around like being here with you all in Sydney, but what we're building at Noname and where we're going to go. So
wow, thank you, Michael. Thanks for sharing that personal, a little bit of yourself. Thanks for that.
Of course.
Padma, do you want to share a little bit about yourself? Well, we heard.
They've heard enough from me already. Although I was just thinking we should have flipped the room the other way around, because looking that way is much better than looking this way. Sorry.
Hi everyone, I'm Padma Iyer. I've been working in security for last 18 years. So the story goes back to my uni days where I was an avid Harry Potter reader, and I had to read the book on first day to avoid anyone leaking the story to me. So I was so averse that somebody would tell it to me that for 1 month I wouldn't even talk to anyone, or switch off I would look at every messages or email with suspicious eyes. Somebody's leaking some information to me. So with that said, I lived in a very two-tier city. It did not have, the bookstore did not have the book coming in on day one. So I approached my dad saying, let's buy online. And he's like, okay, I don't know anything about it. I said, I also don't know, let's go. And when we went to that site, we started shopping in, and at the end page, it was just enter the credit card number. That's it. It did not even have CVV or anything else. And that's it. So this is those days where you would sign it physically. And my dad freaked out. I was like, that's it? Anybody could do that. And if anybody gets my credit card, they could buy it. Like, my father was really risk averse, I suppose. So at the end, we ended up not buying, and I was really mad at my dad, and I had to wait for 4 days to get the book and read it. But I told him that, in the next 1 year, I'm going to research about it and make sure that either tell you that it is already secure or be part of that journey. And that's how it started. And there was no turning back. I mean, security has been such a wonderful journey that I don't think I would be anywhere else.
Well, now you are a top security architect, which proves obviously that determination. That's awesome.
I don't know about top, but security professional.
Awesome, thank you, Padma. Any question do you have in the room? Just before, otherwise I'll start with the first one. But it's even better if it comes from you. Michael, Troy, Padma. You know where they come from. Any question right now? They're swag. Actually, let's offer this one. Oh. See, I don't even care about the question.
Yeah, you mentioned credentials spraying.
Yep.
So I'm wondering how prevalent that trick is in the cybersecurity incident, credentials spraying. So also, I'm wondering that that cybersecurity tactics is a bit of a shooting in the darkness. So spraying means that it most likely it won't be successful at the first incident. So you can try again, and then on the same IP address, someone tried with different credentials. Then wouldn't it be possible to detect that and then send the reg signals? So it's I'm a bit surprised that this credential spraying is a successful hacking method. Yeah.
I'll take a stab, and then I'll definitely hand pass it over to you. But it's an easy one, right? And because it's easy, it's prevalent. You don't have to go far to get a huge list of exposed usernames and passwords. I mean, if has anyone been onto the I've been pawned website, it's nothing dodgy about it. Trust me. But I went in the other day, and there's so many lists of where my name has been exposed. And, we all generally in the profession, we know that you don't use the same password, but many people do across so many accounts. So you'd be surprised how successful it is when people use the same password across multiple different accounts and multiple different emails. And I think one of the benefits of something like Noname from an API perspective, because obviously there you can just do it via an API, you can do it really, really quickly, is when you start getting into these behavioral anomalies at a very granular level. So, things like requests per second, error per second, different types of user agents, different types of geolocations. All of those go into kind of a risk profile around helping to try and mitigate it, not necessarily remove it. For me, I think probably the more challenging one is when you get to credential stuffing. So they are all valid. And then that goes back to my first point around looking at some of the volumetrics around the API, the good behavior API baseline. Padma, anything to add?
I'm not surprised. That's what I would say.
Yeah. No, good question though.
Yeah, good question. And yep.
I've got a little question about how you actually wire this magic in. Does it come in via the API manager, for example, inside MuleSoft, or do you have to actually modify your application to work with your tool?
So glad to hear no application changes. We in essence sniff the wire, and that sniff can be multiple different ways. So it can be through an integration with MuleSoft or with other API gateways. It can be things like F5. We can use their high-speed logging with increased verbosity, and we capture it from that perspective. We can do simple network taps like Gigamon and span ports and everything. So we've got about 100 different ways of how we can get traffic in, even a crude TCP dump and PCAP upload we can do. And as I said, all the way through to Kubernetes, daemon sets, eBPF, lots of different ways. I think the key is, as you said earlier, most of those are out of band deliberately so we don't add that latency or service risk. Otherwise, we'd have to do a whole lot more engineering work to make sure that we provided the 6, 7, 9s that some organizations may need in terms of availability.
So a lot of people use this in concert with Cloud Hub so that you can talk with MuleSoft and wire it in at their HTTP.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that just to state the obvious, is this idea, our partnership with MuleSoft it gives MuleSoft the availability for APIs that the gateway doesn't see, right? So it could be running through a load balancer, but the gateway doesn't see it. So it's a big services opportunity, and it's an opportunity for MuleSoft to have a better exposure to the APIs within the enterprise. Is it the partnership between Noname and MuleSoft allows the organization to operate more efficiently, right? That the APIs are routed correctly.
And I think I'm probably just going to speak a bit out of turn. I think when we first came to market, there was a little bit about hesitation about partnering with Noname around, well, are they going to cannibalize my business? Are they a threat? And I think testament to the fact that we're part of, the MuleSoft relationship is that we're not actually, we all play nice together.
Satish? Yep.
Hey, my question is regarding events and streams of data, right? So while around the API aspects of security, there is so much that MuleSoft plus Noname can offer, particularly in the space of say processing lots of batch data or events, streams, ton of data coming through the streams. Any experience that you can share on what kind of vulnerabilities could be there and what kind of protection mechanisms can be built?
Do you want to elaborate a little bit in terms of the streams perspective? So I know we've got active development and some asynchronous APIs which have been trending. In terms of streaming, I think most of it is we do, we analyze the headers and as much of the payload where it's pertinent, where it's traffic that we think is API centric. So application type JSON, XML, etc. We don't start looking and trying to inspect stuff that's non-API centric or large files, video streams, those sorts of nature. Did I get that right or?
Yeah. I mean, there is the batching, right? To the capacity of that, you're not looking at all traffic.
Yeah. So I get it now as well. So there's configurable batch sizes as well, so you don't have to stream it. And there's the trade-off around east-west bandwidth efficiency when you batch, and the offside is the difference between insight and action or observation, insight and action. Yeah.
There was another question here.
From projects planning perspective, does Noname will help us in guiding
the setting up of infrastructure as well, or what stage does Noname should get involved?
Yeah, great question. We have to get some more. But you want to take that one? I'm happy to take a stab again.
Really?
I'll go for it, but then the next one's you for sure. No, to answer your question, obviously we've kind of got two use cases like that. So one use case that's come up quick recently is, you know, people doing migrations to the cloud or migrations away, and using something like Noname.
I would say like what you see a lot is the migration from the data center to the cloud.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a legacy APIs, you have deprecated APIs, and you're starting to move your data center to the cloud. Right.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're taking your old on-prem APIs, you're doing, you know, hopefully not the lift and shift, the lift, tinker and shift. And part of that due diligence of your state before you do that migration and your risk pre and post is some, you know, good use case for Noname to help de-risk that journey. With some of our integrations, we do consume configuration as well. So from the hyperscalers and from some of the gateways. So we can then also help with posture around configuration of that infrastructure component as well. So things, you know, like when an API backend is directly accessible by the internet and you've got something on your ALB that's misconfigured, we can call out those sorts of things. But we don't generally lead into helping you architect target infrastructure, if that makes sense.
One thing that probably we can just extend a little bit, you know, when we are talking about ingestion of data, and we have been talking about, like, you know, data can be coming from multiple places. But one interesting thing that we see very, very often with most customers, for obvious reasons, is that they are on a multi-cloud journey, or they're already there. And also they also have their own data centers. So can you just tell us a little bit about how that ingestion of data can come from multiple cloud providers, like hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, and obviously like with hardware, physical hardware?
No, come on in. So great question. With Noname, we've got this concept of distributed architecture. So we can deploy what we call remote engines into different hyperscalers, different VPCs, isolation, all that sort of stuff. And all that traffic that is captured within that environment is sent locally to there for processing. So it helps with data privacy. It helps with scalability. And the processed data is what gets sent to the Noname backend. So it also helps with egress costs. We've had quite a few customers where we've seen a whole bunch of egress costs coming out of their cloud. And
I would also say, you know, another important thing is this idea of localization of data, right? So we have this distributed sort of architecture. So if you think of the three-letter agencies in the U.S. within the U.S. military as the most secure, they want a pure on-prem deployment. They want root access to the platform. That's available in Noname, all the way to a pure SaaS offering. So in this question is this idea of pure on-prem to hybrid to pure SaaS. And so the architecture that Troy's framing up is this very flexible architecture, and depending on the country and the vertical of the industry that we're in and working with, there's sort of the customer gets to pick how they want to deploy the platform, and they get the same offering, just in a different format, right? So.
Yeah. And for Australia, this is super important because especially here, customers are always very data centric and sovereignty regulatory.
Yeah. You think of financials and government. I was just in Indonesia yesterday, and it was a pure on-prem conversation. I had 7 different customer meetings, and they were all sort of on-prem. What does that architecture look like? They weren't interested in SaaS. If you go, if you go to California in the US, it's generally those organizations are pure SaaS, right? Like that's all they do, right? And so it's just super important to recognize where the customer is in their journey to the cloud. And I think the one benefit and the reason that Noname, the reason that we're sitting in this room with you all is because of our ability to move our architecture to move with end users and our partners, right?
Yeah.
So
just one thing I'd like to add there is, thanks for the support, by the way. Tail end, a couple months ago, we've managed to instantiate a cloud SaaS backplane in Australia. So we've got an Australia domicile control plane.
Wow. We
We would do the same thing, like the conversation with the Indonesian government yesterday was same with Indonesia, right? So as we grow with our customers, Germany's another example. We'll adapt to the customer demand, right? So
Thank you. We have a question here.
This one done.
Here, yes. Thank you. That's okay.
We are wiring Noname product along with the MuleSoft in the backend. So will there be any performance issues for the API?
No.
So it's that's all right.
yeah, the target is no, the answer is no. Like it's software, right? So the answer, there's no definitive answer, but the idea is out of band, no performance impact to
Right.
MuleSoft, right? No performance impact to the API. It's as designed, there shouldn't be an impact, right?
I mean, splitting the hairs on it, there may be a slight incremental load on the appliance or the application because it has to make a copy and send that off.
Right.
But because it's batched, it's no performance to the API. You may get, between 1% and 3% more CPU or memory usage on platform A, B, or C.
Right. And that's why my concern was like, we had a previous experience with other integration products where the third-party tools started integrating and then
and
we had an impact on it.
it's a great call out for most of our main integrations. We've done a whole bunch of performance benchmarking. It's all available on our repository, so you can capacity plan appropriately.
So where your applications or your tool runs has different resources and CPUs and things like that, and doesn't interfere the applications.
Correct. Yeah.
That's great. And so do you help with proactively identify the risk for the API securities?
Yeah. So it's sort of the world that we live in, right? And so one of the advantages that we have with any of our partners in MuleSoft is the example, but also with our end user customers is that we have this cyber experience where we help you acknowledge what you're actually seeing in the console. So you have that support that's built into our subscription offering.
Cool. Thank you.
Good.
When it comes to automated pen testing, I know like Noname is capable of covering most of the test cases, but is there anything that a manual pen testing could do, but we can't automate in Noname?
100%. I mean, we're not there to replace pen testing. What we're saying is let's do 80% of those test cases every minute, every hour, everything else, as opposed to, the quarterly bi-monthly pen tests. But this is definitely a question that I can throw your way.
Thank you. I was going to that. So I think this is from my experience that you can always do what we call as grammatical error checks, like, if there is scripting, injection attacks and all. But when it comes to business logic or any of your workflows, or you want the API to render something in a certain order, and all those things, I think it is always the manual testers. That's why pen testers still,
so when it comes to all
value
those
add.
value chain pen test, right, you got a different flow from one system to another system.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. We were having, I just realized a very interesting conversation we're having before, Padma. It's very common when we talk to customers that when around the API security space, they always tell us like, oh, we are covered because we are under a firewall. We have a firewall, or we have a WAF, or the classic, oh, no, it's okay because our APIs have OAuth 2.0. Is that in your experience enough? Or is that what is the challenge for basically these organizations that think that they will be totally protected because they have a WAF, they have firewalls, and they have OAuth 2.0?
That's one of our battle too, convincing our stakeholders, convincing different management that that's not enough. So I think it all goes back to the way APIs work. Like traditionally, when we have a typical web application, yes, having a WAF really covers it. But I'm going to sound like a broken record that Carlos, you and Troy, you both have already covered. The biggest thing with API that I find is it's so loosely coupled, it's hard to know that something exists. So I'm going to use some of the fancy jargon that these guys use, like shadow API, blind spots. So in simple terms, whether an API is actually out there or not, if you don't know that, how are you going to secure it? Yes, having the protection as adding a WAF, adding authorization, yes, it's must. But first you should know that there is something there. And as I think someone's asked that question, like, how do we know if there is someone's developing an API and putting it across? That's probably, to me, is the biggest challenge, which no WAF or OAuth can solve it. So yeah, I mean, once we know those, once we identify them, yes, we need to go further and add the authentication, authorization, protection, monitoring, all those aspects, which I think Noname covers wonderfully.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Any other question?
I think just expanding on that a little bit, Padma, I just a bit earlier, I was looking at the notifiable mandatory breach notifications. And in the last 6 months, there's been about 400 or something, 500, something like that. The two takeaways I got from that was, scarily, the number that were in critical infrastructure, although critical infrastructure now is quite broad. The other thing I thought was quite interesting to your point around shadow APIs, zombie APIs aspect, is I think almost 2/3 of that those attacks were down to malicious traffic. 1/3 of it were through to misconfiguration and human error, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
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 One over there.
I can
line them up.
Couple of questions. We don't have enough swag.
So I've got 100 pens as well. So that's
yeah, I think one of the things that happened with Optus, I guess, was non-production environment API got exposed and the data was. So that's one of the scenarios. Like, do we what's your suggestion? Is that we also secure all non-production APIs, or in security by design and all those principles in. So I would like to hear on that one, because that's a very common problem with a lot of organizations. The data is lying everywhere, even production data testers just copy it across. So what's your take on that?
Go for it.
I think the way I would approach is outside to inside. So anything on the internet, anything's exposed to the outer world, irrespective of its production, non-production, that needs to be covered. But as you're going inside, and you can take a more cost benefit approach, where you would target first the production, then you add it in your pipeline, and then you can go and target your non-prod area as well. So it's a maturity level that we need to reach at some point, where we know everything that is going in, but we have to start somewhere. So
I'll add on to that. Cover everywhere. More licenses, fantastic. Everywhere.
No, we had this we had this conversation with a huge healthcare in California 2 weeks ago, and they have 7 stages in their non-prod environment, and then they had prod, and they were using all their license count in the non-prod, and it was and they had a budget problem, right? And so really, I love Padma's answer is it to start the other way, because the temptation is to always start in non-prod because it's the easiest, but the highest risk obviously is in your prod.
Right.
And so this is really good coaching for the audience here. I mean, personally, like to Troy's point, we do it all, right? But from a security perspective, start in production, right?
And now we're going to get budget to the way Troy said.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, just to couple that round a little bit. So, 100% get the telemetry into your production, because that's where the risk is. But don't forget, because we can take inspection from multiple locations, we'll typically say, well, let's stick one at your natural egress aggregation point, because that will pick up accidental shadow APIs coming from a non-prod environment that may be exposed. So you've got like that perimeter inspection that is to pick up those kinds of use cases while you do the deep telemetry into your, your prod and your pre-prod environments.
So what you're saying is in the non-prod, we have like a common aggregator or introspector? Like how do we?
So what I'm saying is in production, you're going to stick in, monitor the API gateway, monitor your backend, everything else. You've got all that telemetry. But your whole environment is likely to go out via 1 or 2 egress proxies. Just monitor those, just to make sure that this non-prod environment isn't advertently to your use case, getting access from the internet. You've then got the visibility saying, we haven't seen this API before. It's internet facing. It's not authenticated. It's got PII data in it. All of those things would come through from that metadata analysis and set the alarm bells going on saying, go and do something about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
So we did a POC a few weeks ago down in Brazil, and it was a simple POC. It was 250 APIs. They were all internal facing APIs, and the customer, a very largest distributor of beer in the world, and they said, don't worry about it. We just want to see how easy it is to deploy the platform. You're not going to find anything. And we deployed the platform, and we called the customer back 3 hours later after the call. And 25 APIs were external facing, like with full exposure to customer data from an internal facing API. So this is really to Troy's point, right? Is that you just don't know, right? Yeah. And it's super simple for the dev team to make a mistake. They tweak the API. Today it's good. Next Wednesday it's not, because a simple change was made and it's not documented, right? So
and that happens a lot. And I think that is the wow moment that when you may think you are all right, or you may think there are a couple of things that you are going to have a couple of surprises, but when you install the control plane, the Noname security control plane, and you start really seeing how bad things are, that's when we usually have these aha moments by customers when it's like, okay, close the windows, shut the door. No one has to see this. How can we fix it? Yeah. And that's just value on day one.
100%. I mean, those are the 2 use cases that come up, right? CDN bypass on the way in, API gateway bypass on the way out. 2 very common use cases.
Yeah.
Yep. My second question was around implementation, or, so with your experience with existing customers, like how do you normally, build this capability within an organization? I would guess starting with, your public facing APIs, but in terms of, if we talk about stakeholders, we talk about north-south traffic, more like, external facing risk APIs, and in terms of how do we attack this problem from your experience with various, because this is a new, and as you said, a lot of people, they don't know about what's how many APIs we're running, and I think Padma mentioned about stakeholders. I think there's a challenge there with getting the budget approved and everything. So yeah, like to hear on that.
I'll touch the stakeholder part, and I'll leave the implementation too, because it's specific to Noname. I think if we start with API inventory, getting the API inventory itself, you will realize how cumbersome it is and how many people will have to put in that effort to just come up with a list of APIs. And again, that's the known number, that's the known value. Without naming any breaches that we have seen lately, the breaches have been around unknown ones more. And as you said, how about the non-prod APIs? Now, most of our mobile apps, even if you want to do a testing, it's going to be on the internet for you to do active testing. So there is going to be a non-prod API on the internet. And what it connects to at the backend, we don't know what kind of data sanitation that is being done. We don't know. And I mean, this is what we have experienced before we started this journey. Is when we started just inventorizing API, we realized that it was not just 1 or 2 person; it was a huge man force and a huge amount of effort going back and forth to just get that inventory to certain level. And again, so when the management sees that, they realize that, oh, we are actually sitting on a ticking bomb. So we need to do something about it. That's probably the start of the journey, I would say. And from an implementation standpoint, I think like the approach that we've taken is based on risk, as in what's my highest risk, what's my risk appetite. Because I mean, I love that we could do everything. We don't have the capacity, nor do we have the budget to do that in one go, and we will never be able to do that. So it's better to, like Troy mentioned, hit the area where you're going to get maximum traffic, like your gateway at the top, or monitor your proxy, which is going out, monitor your load balancer. So that way we get the maximum coverage. And most importantly, as we are doing that, try to sneak into the CI/CD pipeline as much control as you can, and like get in the pipeline correct. So every API that is going in is inventorized in some form of a catalog, and also it is, that it is under the radar of monitoring or detection, whatever API security you would want to put in. So thereby we are slowly streamlining. I mean, we've covered the external high risk, and we are slowly correcting the internal and reaching somewhere in between. That would be the approach I can recommend, but talk more.
No, spot on. I think, the simple Pareto analysis, right? Find the biggest pain point, focus there first, the reverse 20-80% rule. Go and look at 20% that's going to give you 80% of your problems, and then work the long tail as necessary. But going back to your question around deployment, again, huge options in terms of, these remote engines, Kubernetes, OVAs that are coming out of our FedRAMP program that are auto-hardened.